Chris Mackowski of Emerging Civil War for the American Battlefield Trust. We have been all over the Stones River battlefield today. We're really glad you're with us. Chris White behind the camera, Garry Adelman stalking around, matching up some photos that he's going to share with you in a minute, and we're going to bring on historian Jim Lewis in just a second. We've been talking about the Confederate attack that has collapsed the right flank of the Union Army here, pushing them all the way back to the road. Literally, their backs are against the wall as they're holding off desperate attacks. But not the entire line collapses. In fact, everything from where I'm standing to my left is going to hold tight fine. And that means at some point that line has got to bend before it breaks. And we are at the hinge of that bend. To talk about it a little bit, I'm going to ask Jim to come on and tell us, why is this particular spot then so crucial for the survival of the Federal Army?
Well, you said it, Chris. It's the anchor point of that new horseshoe-shaped line. I mean, it's very difficult. It's easy to say we're going to reset our position and reset our lines. It's another thing entirely to do it in the midst of a battle that is ongoing with your army falling back on itself. And what Rosecrans needs is a place in his existing line that is not moving so that he can begin to construct that new defensive position along the Nashville Pike. That anchor is going to be provided by Colonel William B. Hazen and the men of his brigade. Now, not by themselves. They will be supported throughout the day by other forces coming there. But in the edge of the trees here behind me, Colonel Hazen and his brigade, who, when he took command of first his 41st Ohio and then this brigade, Hazen having been a member of the regular army, and having kind of the regular army distaste for volunteer soldiers coming out of the Mexican War, he vowed, now that he is a volunteer officer, that his volunteers would not be laughed at by anybody or look down their noses. And so he drilled these guys hard. And all that drilling and all that extra marching and everything that they did brought them to be in this critical moment here on this battlefield, because once things start going, Hazen, with really no real input from up above, not from Rosecrans or anybody else, he feels again empowered to move forward with this. He fights his men from this position. He seamlessly moves regiments in and out of line as they resupply themselves. He changes positions and wheels back when there's a breakthrough to the right here on the Nashville Pike through Crust Brigade, fires into the flank of the enemy, and then advancing and wheeling actually drives that second wave of attack back out. And through the course of basically most of the battle, whereas we've been going kind of from the very early morning to the later in the morning to the afternoon, well, the fighting here starts at 10 o'clock in the morning and it doesn't end until sunset. 4 successive waves of Confederate attack by a total of 6 Confederate brigades will come against this position, and every single one of them will be beaten back. In fact, and you said these are the only Union troops that did not take a step backwards on December 31st, 1862.
And as you talk about the craziness of the fighting and shifting troops in and out, the first thing I noticed when we pulled into this spot, there are 2 artillery pieces near the parking area, and they're pointed in different directions.
Yeah, and we had done a shorter bit about Parsons Battery, but again, even the artillery had, you're fighting here from the east from the attacks, but when the breakthrough happens, and that'll be the second wave of attack by Donelson's brigade, Hazen and all of his men, including the artillery, will actually literally shift positions on the fly, keeping men at a distance that are still coming this way, and fire into that and help break up that attack. And then literally swing down, we talk about Gettysburg and the swinging of the door down Little Round Top that, scoops them up. Well, that kind of happens here in miniature as well, as he kind of kicks them back out again. Hazen and his men, in fact, were so proud of what they did here. As the battle ends and they realize that being the key to this line that wouldn't break along the Nashville Pike that ends up winning the Battle of Stones River, they decide shortly after the battle to begin constructing a monument in the brigade cemetery, which stands today as the oldest intact Civil War era monument on a battlefield, period. So if you come to our park, you will notice that we don't have, like, your Chickamaugas and your Gettysburgs, a monument every 5 feet. We don't have quantity, but what we lack in quantity, we make up for with quality.
That's great. And Chris is showing those pictures now. We're going to visit the sites of these pictures in just a second. But Jim, you have a few icons at this battlefield. The slaughter pen, of course, and you've got Hell's Half Acre where we stand now. You've got this feature behind you, the round forest. Now, I know as a Gettysburg guy, right, that, when you go into town, it's the shape of a square and the road goes in a circle, but it's called the diamond. Is there something like that going on at the round forest?
It's pretty much the same thing. When you look at maps, period maps of this area, the round forest is actually a square. And I always did wonder, when I first got here and, began learning about the battle, and there's they say the round forest. I'm like, how in the heck do you know it's round when you're standing on the ground and walking around it? It's just one long line of trees as far as I'm concerned. You wonder where some of these shape names ultimately come from, but it is the round forest. That's what it was called then, and that's what we call it now.
Good. Let's make our way over here a little bit as we walk and talk. Let me just say that for those of you, if you're disoriented, so were the troops, and so am I when I often come here when I'm not here with Jim. So, get out your Civil War, your American Battlefield Trust maps. Get out your favorite maps. Go on Google Earth, okay? And use the assets that Chris is flashing up as we go. Just know this. Let's, that we're at Hell's Half Acre now. We go across the road, a mile and a half, we'll be at the slaughter pen. There's a cotton field sort of off to the right between it. It's really hard to orient, but going around the battlefield in some order, using the tour route and stopping at those places, using the park's app, I think you can start, not right away, not just from watching these videos, but you have to study these things a little bit if you really want to grasp where we are and what's happening.
And I would also say that if you do find yourself on this battlefield and you feel confused, or any battlefield, I would also say enjoy that moment too, because you are now feeling like most of the soldiers did. They didn't know where they were in relationship to what we're piecing this story together as well. And so I tell our visitors when they come in and say, I couldn't quite figure out where I was, and I said, yep, and you're just like every single soldier that was standing in that line down there. You are having the same emotional experience as they are. It's okay to be like that.
Yeah, and just Chris wanted to come on, but this is perfect. Note that we are spending more time on this battlefield while shooting these videos than many of the soldiers in this battle spent on the battlefield. And nobody's happily shooting at us. There's not cannon everywhere, and it's not the most intense, chaotic moment of our lives. And somehow we expect these soldiers to remember, to get it right, to place their things in the right spot and everything like that. So I think I couldn't agree more with Jim. If you're confused, good. If it's raining out at a place where it was raining during the battle, good.
And I just kind of wanted to pop in to say that one of the things I think is a real testament to this park is that there are many places you can come and step in this park and feel like you're going back into time, even though it's in an urban setting. We've got city all around us, but when you get into the heart of this battlefield, the park has really done a nice job of kind of putting you in a little bubble. Behind us is the north. That's the Nashville Pike. The historic road trace goes up in that direction, conveniently to Nashville, and the south is off in that direction. Off in this direction, though, there's a parallel modern road on the other side of a parallel railroad track. And that's sort of all blocked out, but if we see behind us here, there is a cement plant here, and I had to ask Jim what they were making over there. It's all the limestone in the area. Of course, that makes sense. But this is like a poster child spot for battlefield preservation, because as good of a job as the park does at putting us in that historic bubble, sometimes the modern landscape is going to intrude and it's going to break up what we're doing. And that's one of the challenges that they're always fighting against here at Stones River, because that modern landscape wants to bring inside. But we want to stop here and take a second and step inside close to the monument, because Gary's got some treats to show you, and we're going to take you further back in time, this time through photography.
Good. And then we'll end by talking about some of the land that you, the members of the American Battlefield Trust, have been able to preserve. But first, come on over here, Chris. Chris already flashed this photo up, but let's do a little then and now here. So from roughly this position, you can see this wall here right in front of you. You can see, of course, the wartime monument rising up there in memory of its soldiers. You can see that there used to be stairs over there where you see the entry. You could see there wasn't a gate over there. So you can see a little bit about what's changed since then. And again, man, do I wish this photographer would have shown, and just taken more pictures. Couldn't he have taken one picture of the monument and turned his camera and gotten some of the round forest? Was it round? We were getting more of Hell's Half Acre, looking out toward the cotton field or the cedars. Couldn't we have some sort of wartime photos of Stones River like we have for Vicksburg, Gettysburg, and innumerable Richmond area battlefields? Now, come on in this way. You can see that this is not just a monument, but this is a cemetery for some of the men who actually fought here. So come over this way, and we won't get it perfect, but we'll line it up over here, being careful to stay off the graves themselves. At approximately this location, you can see that we're doing a then and now, and you can even see some of the stones that came right up to the monument over there. So, it's a really good opportunity somehow. I call it the closest thing we have to time travel is to stand in these same spots, and then that feeling you get, sort of like wow or cool. I think it's more than that. I think you're having a four-dimensional sort of experience where time enters the 3D space. I'm not trying to get too heady here, but that's actually what I believe. Now, maybe I can bring Jim back on here to talk, say a little bit about what he knows about who's here, and then let's talk about some land over on the other side of the railroad.
Well, who is buried here is the men of Colonel William B. Hazen's brigade. Most of the men are casualties of the Battle of Stones River, although others are casualties, the men that pass from disease or other things. In fact, one of them buried here was murdered by a fellow teamster. So yeah, it ain't just battles and it ain't just disease that sometimes gets you during the Civil War. But while they were stationed here, they continued burying men from the brigade who passed away for other reasons in here. And there's about 55 members of Colonel William B. Hazen's brigade buried here. The monument itself was unfinished, just a smooth slab when Colonel Hazen and his men marched off with the Army of the Cumberland on the Tullahoma campaign. The inscriptions you see here were actually placed in 1864 when then General Hazen hired two soldiers from the 115th Ohio Infantry, Daniel C. Miller and Christian Bauhoff, to, in their spare time, come over and actually do the inscriptions. In fact, both Miller and Bauhoff apparently took a lunch break along the banks of the Stones River, off of the Stones River Greenway, and chiseled in their names in graffiti on one of the rocks over there as well. So we have a little bit of evidence of their carvings outside the park's boundary as well. And one really cool thing, some of you may have been following us on Facebook and seen recently a photo of Daniel Miller. That was actually a recent acquisition, a little book of small carte de visites from the 115th Ohio, and I could not believe it when I was kind of flipping through the soldiers, and the third one that came up was Daniel Miller. We never knew what this guy looked like. We had his letters talking about doing the monument, so that was a really exciting moment for us. So.
One of the things I want to point out about the monument before we turn things over to Gary, the inscription on the side here, and I want to kind of draw some connections between some of the things we've been seeing on this western swing. I'm going to kind of cheat toward the monument for a second. The veterans of Shiloh have left a deathless heritage of fame on the field of Stones River. And as we've been exploring these battlefields, we talked about the scope of the tragedy at Shiloh and being, the largest battle ever fought on the continent up to that point with staggering numbers of casualties. Here at Stones River, we've talked about the most deaths percentage-wise, most casualties, percentage-wise in the whole Civil War. So we've got these dots that we're connecting over the course of this trip, one tragedy after another, and it's present with these men who are referring back to other experiences that they've had over the course of this war. I want to toss things over to Gary for a second, and we're going to look off beyond this little small cemetery to an important piece of ground that the Trust has helped to secure to help bring this battlefield together. Gary?
Yeah, you Trust members will know this, and Chris will bring up a map in a second, but let me use the handheld for a second here because this is important. Note that when Chris Mackowski was talking about how there's sort of a salient or an angle here, wouldn't it be nice if this area, if we could preserve, all that's going on over there? It's not just Negley. Hazen. There's other people fighting there, and plus it might almost connect the two disparate parts of the preserved land at the park. Well, that's just what we've been able to do. This is a former GM plant. Our friends at O'Reilly Auto Parts had acquired it, and then actually we worked out a great deal, and they were not selfish in that manner. We're big fans of O'Reilly, and we were able to secure this. Now, if Chris is able to pull up the map, it's in orange on that particular map, and you can see that there's a lot going on there. And eventually, this will make it into the hands, we hope, of the National Park Service, who will be able to incorporate what is now a fenced-in kind of inaccessible area into the interpretation of this battlefield, and maybe eventually be able to somehow connect, the disparate parts of this battlefield and make it, a little bit more understandable to people. Do you have anything to add to this, Jim?
I do.
Okay.
For the story, come over to the wall here and actually look over behind me, because I heard Chris talking about how, as you're telling these stories as you've been going along, this is one tragedy, after another going on, but there is a reason for it. And you look over the wall behind me and you can see the headstone of Sergeant William Holland of the 111th United States Colored Infantry, and then the man behind him is his grandson. And it's a very interesting story. Holland was a slave here in Middle Tennessee when the Battle of Stones River was being fought down in Columbia, Tennessee. Sometime shortly after that, and with the finally the signing of the Emancipation Proclamation, he would end up working for the Union Army, occupying the area around Columbia, and ultimately becoming a member of the United States Colored Troops, getting an opportunity to literally fight for his own freedom. He would find his way back here to Murfreesboro because it's the 111th United States Colored Infantry that will be the workforce that reburies all the Union soldiers that are buried on the battlefield and in the hospitals in what we know of as Stones River National Cemetery today. And Holland and many of the other members of the 111, plus many other formerly enslaved people from the area after the war was over, would actually settle on the battlefield and build new lives as free people and citizens of the United States. And so I've kind of shortened that story up a great deal. You can actually see his story on our website in more fullness, but when you think about all these tragedies and all these young lives lost that we're talking about here, and you have to wonder to yourself, is it worth it? William Holland and 4 million other African Americans who were held as property before this war broke out would probably say yes.
I just got goosebumps. I'm not lying. That was fantastic. And as we stand here on a piece of property known as Hell's Half Acre, and think about the horrificness, we stand in a cemetery, men who fought and died in that action, and we've got freedom right here as well. And the sublime connection that all comes together as a result of that. What a privilege it is to be out here on these fields. What a privilege it is to be sharing these stories with you. We couldn't do it without you. Thank you for bringing us out here, for your support of this trip. Go to American Battlefield Trust website, battlefields.org, and see all the other great stuff that we've got going on. Thank you so much to Chris behind the camera, to Gary, to Jim. I'm Chris Mackowski. Thanks for being with us, and thank you so much for supporting Battlefield Preservation.